name is James Chirwa, as you have heard. I'm with AFRINIC's Registration Services team. Yeah, so I'm a member of the AFRINIC's Registration Services team. I'll start with a brief introduction for those who may not be aware of what AFRINIC is or what AFRINIC does. AFRINIC is one of the 5 regional internet registries. We run the IP numbers registries. AFRINIC has 5 for the continent, the African continent, as well as the Indian Ocean region. So in my presentation today, I'm basically covering what we do, what we expect the members, those who have IP resources from AFRINIC, what we expect them to do in order to make things smooth for both us and them. I'll also give you an update on some of the services that are related to the IP number resources, as well as an update on policies, because mainly our work is governed by policies. First of all, under the IP number resource management, we'll cover what the number resources are, and then what the Whois database is. Yeah, so I was talking that we'll be looking at the Whois database, managing the the IP numbers. I'll talk about exhaustion, and I also talk about what the state that we are right now and what it means, or what are the implications of exhaustion. That's IPv4 exhaustion in particular. And then I'll provide updates on what we are working on, some of the features, as well as the services. So what do we mean when we talk about number resources or IP number resources? Basically, we are talking about IP addresses, IPv4 and IPv6, and autonomous system numbers. I believe most of us here, we are network operators, and this is something we pretty much know well. I will not dwell much on that, but basically you can see what we do with. We have specific objectives while we run this registry. We try to ensure that we have correct registration information as one of the objectives. We also try to make sure that IP space is conserved as much as possible. We want to avoid wastage when we issue out resources, because the resources, the IPv4 or IPv6, they are all finite. So we want to make sure that they are put to use efficiently, so that any other operators who are coming up later on, they should be able to access the same limited resources. Aggregation is another thing that we try to practice as much as possible. It's not easy due to the way the whole process was started at the beginning. Resources were being defragmented a lot, but we still try to make sure that we make them, we provide members as much as possible aggregated spaces, in order to basically, bottom line, to ensure that the global route doesn't blow up. I know most of you already have a sense of the growth of the global routing table, but that's one of the things we try to manage to see. It doesn't grow exponentially. We try to put some control in that. So these number resources, how do we manage them? We have what we call the Whois database. I'm sure most of you know what it is. It's publicly accessible. If you just type whois.afrinic.net, you should get something either on your web or also on command line. If you have a Whois program on your laptops, you could be able to access it. So the Whois database itself uses what we call the RPSL. What RPSL does is basically it's the routing policy specification language. That's the specific RFC for those who are interested to get more. It defines the objects in a specific way where it becomes a common understanding for operators, service operators. So when we keep these resources in the database, they use these particular objects for identification. Specifically for number resources, the three that I spoke about, IPv4, IPv6, and the S numbers, they are contained in these particular objects. If you'd see like INET num or INET 6 num, that would specifically contain details about an IPv4 block. So it will specify the range of the block, it will specify who owns it, or who it is assigned or allocated to, and it will specify contact information for that particular organization. So if you are looking for an IP address, v4, v6, this is the specific object to look for. Similarly, when you go to autonomous system numbers, this is how it is contained in the Whois database. So it will contain similar information, just like what is contained, but the primary key is this one, the object type itself is containing the autonomous system number rather than the IP address. The others would be domain, which for most of you, as you may know, AFRINIC provides you the reverse delegation for your IP space. The mapping from your number to the host name. So with that domain name, specifically information regarding the reverse delegation, that means the name servers will be contained in that particular domain. Root, for those who are using IR, internet routing registries, this is the object that you have to deal with. So basically, these are the specific objects that we deal with specifically when it comes to dealing with the number resources. Moving on later on, you'll see some information specific to organizations. So in one of the slides ahead. These resources, as I was talking about, IPv4, IPv6, and autonomous systems, they have specific status when they are in the Whois database. What does this status mean? It tells you whether that particular object is allocated or assigned to somebody or not. This comes in handy when you are trying to troubleshoot. We are having cases of bogons. If you realize that maybe some particular IP address is trying to access your network and you search the Whois, it tells you that the status is available. That means that particular block is not allocated to anybody. That particular person is just using it illegally. So it helps people in troubleshooting if you understand these particular statuses. Available, that's what it means. Allocated or assigned, that means we've issued it to a particular entity. Reserved, for particular reasons, some specific prefixes will be reserved. One of the reasons would be that the prefix was in use by somebody and it's been given back to the registry. We reserve it for sanitization before it can be allocated again or assigned to somebody else. So that's about the status. Now, when I spoke about earlier on that we expect members, once they get the IP addresses, to also be responsible in one way or the other. It really becomes handy when members do know a bit about what they're expected to do. Because one of the things is it takes away the lag time that happens by you for a small issue. You send us a ticket, which may take up to 24 hours before you can get a first response, when in fact, that thing is just a tiny thing you could have done yourself. So small things, we encourage members to understand when we issue resources, we also provide you what we call a maintainer object. We expect members to understand. I'll explain more on the maintainer object later on, but this is something that once we give it to you, we give you the maintainer object and the password. We expect you to keep it properly somewhere safe or somewhere easily accessible, but it has to be also safe and, okay, I would rather we put it safe and available. I'll explain how handy this one comes in, but another thing is, what do we expect members to do? We expect you, once you have your resources, to be able to create your root objects. These root objects usually come, most of you, once we've issued you resources, once you start provisioning the IPs on your network, you'd be turned back by your upstream to say, no, we cannot route your prefix until you create this particular object. So we usually emphasize to say, once you get your resources, once you start engaging with your upstream, go ahead and create root objects. We have guides on the internet, guidelines for that, but we also provide you, most of you need the maintainer object in order to create this. That's why I've said that particular maintainer object is quite important, and I'll emphasize on it, and I'll talk more later on within the same session. Another thing is you also need to create your route origin authorization. These two, route objects and route origin authorization, they are quite important. For those that are practicing manners, you know what I'm talking about. These two components form part of manners. So you will need those. For most operators now or upstream, they are really emphasizing on their downstream customers to have these in place. So you can also, you also need to be registering how you are using your prefixes. This is your responsibility. It becomes handy when you need additional resources because we don't need to send you back to provide us this information. Once you already have it, it makes life easy for both you, and that's why we evaluate your requests. So another thing is reverse delegation. For those who are maybe having your email servers or other products that are using your SMTP, you need to do a mapping, the PTR records. So even if you do PTR records on your name servers, but if you have not registered your reverse delegation with us, if you haven't registered those name servers with us, that will break, it will not work. So it's important to do that in advance before you you send us any emails. It's important to do that. Okay, sorry for that. I hope this problem will go away soon. Okay. So how do you do all what I've been talking about in the last slide? These are the interfaces that you can use to interact with. For members, you have this access to my.afrinic.net. You need what we call the personal handle. In the database, it's called the NIC handle. So with that, you're also given a password. You'll be able to access the portal, you'll be able to work with everything. Another thing that you can use is what we have is the Whois web interface, whois.afrinic.net. With that, you'd be able to also use, similarly, you can use sending email. You just need to get a template of the object you are dealing with, fill in the required values for each attribute, send it to us. These two last methods would require you to have that maintainer I was talking about and the password of it. So with those two, you should be okay to proceed. That's why I'm always talking about, I'm emphasizing on the maintainer because it is quite important for you. Once you keep the password safe for the maintainer, trust me, your life in interacting with these three interfaces would be so easy. So moving on, I'll be talking now about where we are in terms of the IPv4 space. Most of you, as you know, that IANA has depleted all its IPv space that was available. And most of the other internet regional internet registries have also exhausted their prefix, their space. It's only AFRINIC that still has a bit. And as we speak, we have about 4.8 million IP addresses available. That's in /32's IPv4. So out of those 4.8, about 2 million is already reserved by policy for what is called the second phase of soft landing. I'll talk about it in the next slide. But at the moment, does it mean, this is just a show of how the depletion progress has been over the year. Now we are only remaining with like 0.3 or 30% over /8 to deplete. So what does second phase mean of the soft landing? Right now, every operator, the maximum you can get of IPv4 is a /13. No more than that. You can get it in multiple times, but not at once. Once we reach the remaining 2 million, that's a /11, that means any operator, the maximum or the maximum amount they can get is a /22, nothing more. So we estimate to be there within the next 2 to 3 months with the rate that we have observed. So what does it mean to you? What are the implications once we reach that level? Some signs we are already seeing them. There's been an increase in hijacks, prefix hijacking, prefix squatting. We are seeing these already happening. These are some of the implications. Another question is, will it have an impact as there will be no longer as much IPv4 space as we've been used to? Does it mean it will accelerate IPv6? That's a question. That's food for thought for you as operators. So these are things to keep in mind, but that's where we are heading. An operator, once we reach second phase, would only be able to get up to a /22. Minimum would be a /24. So that's where we are going. Moving on, I guess it's time for IPv6 to really take place. So I'll move on to now services. Some of the services that we provide that are attached to these IP number resources. The first one is the Internet Routing Registry. I mentioned it earlier. Similarly, the Internet Routing Registry also uses the RPSL, just like the Whois database itself. The advantage of that is easily integrated into the Whois, and it provides single source of information for us and as well as for you. When you are dealing with the Whois database, you can easily also deal with the Internet Routing Registry. So what is it for? Basically, you store your routing policy information in there. Another service provider wants to know how you are supposed or how you plan to announce your IP prefixes. They consult the Internet Routing Registry. It gives a level of trust between operators in the sense that BGP itself doesn't have a built-in trust mechanism, and Internet Routing Registry is there to support that particular trust. We've had this Internet Routing Registry since 2013. The growth initially was slow, but it has been picking up. You'll be able to see in the next slide. You realize that in the next slide, the growth shows to have, there have been 2 jumps since last year and this year. So, I mean, between 2017 and 2018, In 2017, RIPE announced that they will be closing what, okay, I'll give a brief history that in the past, before, like I said, we had one since 2013. Before that, our members were advised to populate their internet routing registry information in RIPE database. It was possible. RIPE used to provide public access password, which would allow you to create autonomous system numbers in there and then create the route objects. Now with that, it brought in some security concerns because there were possibilities of somebody changing your information because the password was shared. So RIPE decided to close that. And when they announced the closure, that's when you see that this particular time, there was that increase because they just announced that within the next year, they will be closing it down. And no one would be able to create new objects in there. So people started now populating now in our database. Moving on a year later, that's when they finally closed it. And similarly, it impacted a lot of other operators who are still using RIPE. So most of them also had to rush and populate their routing register information in our database. It has had a stable growth after that. This is basically because of some initiatives that we've seen. One of the initiatives is the manners. I'm sure most of you know about it. Mutual agreeable norms for routing security. IRR forms part of it. So the manners initiative is really doing much in making this happen. Also, we have INCS as well as KZN-NOG, who I know they've been really proactive on this, getting their partners in adopting IR as well as RPKI. So the next service is RPKI, still part of manners as well, like I mentioned. So RPKI, okay. It's another framework that helps in securing the global internet routing. It's a security framework for verifying the association between the IP blocks and the autonomous system numbers that are generating those IP, that are announcing those IP blocks to the internet. So it's another added layer of trust. It proves the right of use. It shows, because it's certificate based, so it shows who has the right to use a particular resource, to have it announced to the global internet. If you have two ASNs announcing it and only one prefix is showing to have the certificate, then somebody would trust that particular. If both of them don't have, then it becomes a challenge, which means BGP will be the one to make a decision based on the path. So this is another important part that is really helpful. On what I mentioned about the hijacks, these are one of the ways you can be able to survive these hijacks. So you can see that particular link at the bottom. It specifically gives you more information of how you can do this resource certification. For this particular two services, IR and RPKI, we are having tutorial sessions tomorrow that will run one after the other. So for those of you who are interested in getting more, you can join us tomorrow. Just check the program from the screen outside there. You'll be able to find the room and the time. The next one, now this is the RPKI adoption. You would also see this particular growth here. This is recent, and this is all thanks to those three I mentioned, the manners team, INCS, as well as KZN. NOG. They've been really pushing for these initiatives. The next one we provide is DNS Sec, another certificate-based method for of trust between now, this is now on the DNS side. Like I said, we provide reverse delegation for our members for the resources that we give you. Now, there is a level of trust that is needed, and this is where we come in. When you have registered your domains, and then you can generate your DS records, you register them on our portal. They'll be added to your resources, and then anybody can trust your resources. I mean, the information that goes in between would have the certificate verification. The deployment at AFRINIC itself covers mostly 3 aspects. We have the self-signing, that's for the top level, the bigger blocks that we have. Once we get them from IANA, we sign them first of all, and we publish these DS records as well. And then when a member is issued the resources, once they sign theirs, they give us the DS, we accept the DS records and publish them as well for them. So this is basically what we do. And you can get more information as well on that from that site over there. Adoption of Dns Sec, that is the current adoption. It's a bit low, but we are working on a way to increase the adoption of this. We've noticed that most people aren't using Dns Sec, but that's something that we are working on an initiative to make sure that it's happening. The next thing that we'll look at is, I'll just talk briefly on transfers. Previously, we never accepted transfers, basically. We would transfer your resources based on mergers and acquisition. But in 2017, a policy was accepted to allow one entity that is registered in within our service region to be able to transfer resources to another entity also registered or incorporated in the AFRINIC service region. So this enables you for a particular service and but there hasn't been an appropriate merger or an acquisition, you'll be able to that you need to satisfy. That includes the policy. There are the policy conditions that specifically states what you need to meet before this can be accepted. So we've had a few people who have come, they couldn't satisfy the conditions. Their requests have been turned back, but we advise people to read through the policies before they can send in a request so that you understand what you're getting yourself into. And when the team of hostmasters tells you something, you should be able to comprehend what it implies. So for transfers, you can be able to transfer full blocks or partial block, a part of what you have. So as long as everything falls under the conditions that are accepted, it will be able to happen. The other one is mergers and acquisition. This usually comes in, we've had issues that most people, when the actual merger and acquisition of companies is happening, they don't inform AFRINIC in advance. It comes with a problem where mostly maybe when it comes to billing issues and then you are billed in a name which doesn't exist anymore. And then you come back to say, we can't pay this because this company doesn't exist. So we advise members that at that particular time, when you are doing that, also consider making the change in time so that we don't face those, such challenges. These ones are accepted, but you need to provide us proof of the acquisition or the transaction that has happened. Some people show concerns about privacy and everything. You are accepted to cancel out any financial details that are considered confidential. But in whatever you are giving us, give us something that would demonstrate the terms of the agreement. We are not interested in the other figures and everything, but we need to understand the actual agreement that happened. There are a few other things that you'll be asked for. And this also becomes an issue if you come to us very late, because some of the information has been lost along the way and it becomes hard to prove that. So we advise you to make sure you are able to come in as quickly as possible so that we help you in time. The mergers and acquisition are a bit different from the previous one, the policy-based transfer, this one. This one only accepts IPv4. Why? This is just how the policy was accepted. So if you have an ASN, if you have IPv6, you know that these two cannot be transferred along. Either you remain with them in a different type of member category, or you give them back to AFRINIC. If the other entity still wants another set of those resources, they'll have to do a new request for those. But the IPv4 is the one that would be transferred. Meanwhile, for the merger and acquisition, because these are, it's more like there's a continuity in between whereby one service has been running and it continues to grow. IPv6 and ASNs are also accepted. We merger or we do a transfer for those entirely. So I'll move on now to some of the service updates. We've had issues in the regarding payments. So we've looked into how we could help some of the members in that. Some members have been having issues maybe in settling their payments in time, and they've been ending up maybe at a later stage asking for credit card option. So we have introduced a new feature for those members. I mean, for every member, you can just log in onto our platform. You'll be able to see where you can update whether you want to be paying through credit card or wire transfer. It's like a pre-declaration so that AFRINIC knows in advance. This will be considered at billing time. So those things are happening. If you also prefer to pay in a different currency, that is, right now we are only having US dollars and euros, but work is in progress to also consider other currencies, which probably Rand would be one of them. But in the meantime, we only have for Euro and US dollars. So you can pre-declare that as well. The other thing is withholding tax. I don't know what it means, but I've noticed, I think especially for this year, that it seems like most of the members from South Africa have experienced something like that. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I think there is a withholding tax that has been introduced or something like that. So we have given the option to say, go in, pre-declare if there is a withholding tax. You go and pre-declare from your platform, from the platform. The billing will automatically consider that. So that's another thing. Upcoming, we've received requests from the database working group. They've discussed. We've reached a point where we've accepted some specifications to be introduced regarding IRR onto the platform itself. This is work in progress. We've submitted all the specifications. We are waiting for timelines of delivery. Another thing is BPKI. That's another service that comes in handy for RPKI. So we are introducing a web-based form that would help members register their enroll for BPKI certificates. Last part is I'll just quickly go through the policies. This is just the last part. Okay, let me just quickly speak about the maintain object, like I said. So maintain object, it secures Whois database objects, like I initially said. It has attribute where it's mostly used, that's the maintainer by, or it can be used under these other attributes here. What it does is it's either protects that particular object, or it will allow you to be able to create certain other objects. If you can see these use cases, this is a use case of protecting an object. Well, this one would be one for creating an object. Even the root here, if you want to create a root, which means you need to have the maintainer for this particular, the password for that particular maintainer object. So it's quite important to keep that information in mind, and this is quite helpful. Another thing I would like to bring to our attention is the policy development process. This is more like, I find it a bit of a pain point because most people don't read policies before they come for any service. And this really delays the progress of an evaluation. We advise members to familiarize themselves with policies. You don't have to read them all in advance, but whenever you have something you want to do with us, having a look at policies may enlighten you more. Some policies already have their own best practice documents, which can give you a guide to what you want to do. So reading policies is really important. The policies are what governs how AFRINIC does this business. So it will also enlighten some gray areas. I think on the slides, you can see we have some policies that are ongoing and some policies that are like almost concluded, and there are some policies that are still ongoing. I encourage you to go and read those policies from our website, understand them. These ones still are under discussion, and you can see how they fit into your business and see whether they are best for you or not. And your contribution is of utter importance. Your contribution really matters because once these are accepted, they affect everybody. Any operator, anyone who is our member, you get impacted. So it's better that you get involved, it's better that you know what's happening, and it's better that you contribute. These are just the final recommendation, and that marks the end of my presentation. Thank you.